All right, welcome to the Time to Grow Up Dad podcast. I know, it has been a while. A lot has happened since the last episode that I recorded, which was a year ago. And I'll be frank. I sort of made a lot of excuses as to why I wasn't able to keep up with the episodes. One of the excuses, of course, with the arrival of a second child, and the excuse was, well, we're adjusting to this new life. I don't have a lot of time. I took a risk in my own career and backing myself fully, which means, in the last year, I've basically um, did my own business, right? Like fully backed myself as a coach, not working for anyone else. And it's been pretty interesting in regards to other opportunities that came up as well. But I made a lot of excuses. And one of the things that was not being done was the podcast. And I think one of the reasons why I sort of came back to this podcast and why I want to give it another crack and why I've decided to continue on with the same title, keeping all the old episodes the same, is because I reminded myself on why I wanted to start this particular podcast. The whole reason was to make sure that this serves as a little bit of a audiobook, if you will, a bit of a trip down memory lane for my kids in the event they do decide to listen to all the yapping that I will do in many, many years to come. Hopefully they do. The intention wasn't really to grow it, even though I would like to see it grow. Yes, there are a couple of lessons that I've learned over last year, but I want to kind of go back to the fundamental reason why I want to start this podcast was I wanted to share my experiences on growing up as a dad and seeing them grow up and just making sure like they sort of understand like, hey, life's pretty hard and honestly, I don't want to give you kids the false sense of security that being a parent is easy. It's probably hard, and you're growing up, and I'm growing up with you as well. So, sob story aside, I want to start off with how many lessons I've learned over the last year. So, a few milestones to kind of maybe tie things together. In an interesting twist of events, my cat had suddenly got into a freak accident, and I'll talk about that in maybe future episodes. And this happened literally 2 to 3 days before Marcus was born, second kid. And what else? I talked about leaving a part-time job and going into backing myself coaching full-time, which then led into some other consultation opportunities, more so getting into lecturing, teaching. Who would have thought? Me, teaching on nutrition and a little bit of biology and chemistry, something I never thought I would say, given that I absolutely hated biology in high school. It was probably my worst subject. I also got a diagnosis for a little bit of my mental health conditions, and again, I'll talk about that in a sec. Nothing too major. Everything is good. I had a few mental breakdowns, worked through them, and a lot of lessons. So those are kind of like the big key points of the last year. So I just want to bring my attention to you, whoever's listening, and hopefully you're also watching or listening to this, dear children, as to some of the lessons that I've learned in the last year and maybe expand on that a little bit and ultimately where I want to take this podcast and the direction I want to take it, frequency, yada, yada, because ultimately, again, it is a podcast, which starts with that. The first and most important thing is coming to a firm conclusion that making money is important. Making money shouldn't be something that everyone should be afraid of doing. And it's not evil. And I think a lot of people have this innate fear of wanting more money or asking for more money because it feels like they're greedy. I don't think that is the case. I think how you make money and what you do with your money shows who you are as a person. Are you doing it in an honest way? Are you doing it in a genuine way? Are you doing it in a a law-abiding way. And how are you spending your money? Are you spending it on things that you don't really need? Or are you actually saving it up for a rainy day? Or are you diversifying your profile? So the first thing that I've really learned over the last year is understanding that making money is not evil. I think making money is good, and I should try to do, and I should try to make more money, right? Which is, which then ties a lot into the next thing, which was getting into this headspace of marketing and trying to put myself out there. And one of the biggest things was like, I realized that my creativity was bad. My creativity was really, really bad when I was in high school, and like even in when I was younger, when I was sort of 10 or maybe 8, and it's gotten so much worse over the last few years. And I tried to make some YouTube content. I tried to be sort of engaging in this podcast format, and it came to my attention that, man, like my creativity sucks. Like it's horrible. And so that led me down the rabbit hole of trying to understand of how I work, like literally how I work and how I function. I realized that I might potentially have some type of ADHD related symptoms. And I'll talk about that in a second. Long story short, you got it tested. Am currently on the mend, or medicated in some way, shape, or form, which highlights the Rumpelstiltskin effect, which is basically when you can put a label to a problem, it makes the problem seem a lot smaller. However, it's not necessarily what you do with the labeling, it's whether you want to actually do something about it. For example, taking a completely tangent here, if I have found out that one of my kids has a certain disorder or a certain issue, am I going to just use that as a crux and say he has a learning disability, or he can't play football because he has a broken leg? It's like, am I going to use that as an excuse, or am I going to go, okay, like I'm going to try to tell you like, hey, look, the truth, the reality is that this is what we know about you. Hey, we know that you've got this problem. The internet and AI is insane these days. And so let's look to actively improve the situation. And that's what I'm trying to do with my ADHD. Now, coming back to the creativity thing, one of the big things was that I want to try to read more. And I've been always wanting to be a big reader. I've read a lot more over the last year than I think any other years. And I've also tried to reduce my screen time usage. And that has sort of sparked the creativity again, which the downstream effect is leading me to want to get back into podcasting again. Because yes, whilst this, I did mention, is going to be more like a history of mine as growing up as a dad for my kids, ultimately, I would like to think people would also want to hear maybe what I say. Maybe people who are getting into the journey of parenthood, fatherhood, or maybe people who are way down the line. And I'm going to draw a lot of parallels to things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because that's obviously a hobby of mine, right? So that's one of the big lessons that I've learned, that my creativity was lacking purely because I think like my inability to focus. And so now that I've put a label on my quote unquote disability, I don't even like to call it disability, I have strategies to try to tackle this as much as I can. And hopefully, the goal, at least for this year going into next, is trying to be a bit more creative with content creation, being better with communication, and helping others, both in my nutrition space, both in my personal training space, and of course, just trying to be a better person overall, to model the fact that I just want to be a good person, and hopefully my kids see the same in me, and I want to do that as well. Some other lessons also, this is a big one, and I know, and I'm not going to name names because I think this is a very sensitive topic. I know friends of mine, personal, close, and acquaintances who are in a relationship, who have kids, who kids of varying ages. I started to see this trend, and maybe it might be a sort of like pink elephant phenomenon, where a lot of these people start to actually separate from their partners, whether they get a divorce because they were married, or maybe they just decide to separate. And I draw upon an essay that Chris Williamson wrote. For those who don't know, Chris Williamson is a podcaster. I guess you would call him a modern philosopher, some would say. And the lesson is about it's an essay about unteachable lessons, and basically the summation of it is, there are some lessons, despite being told by people who have learned those lessons, like break up with this girl because she's going to be the pain of your existence, or money doesn't make you happy. And these are going to be lessons from people who have done those processes. As an individual, you're not going to take those lessons on board until you've experienced those lessons. So that's the crux of the unteachable lessons. And so one of the things that I observe with parenting is I can tell my kid 100 times that touching a hot water or like touching the side of like a boiling kettle is going to burn them. And they're never going to understand it until I allow them to experience pain, true pain. And so one of the tactics that I did use was actually taking my eldest Henry's hand and just like gently touching the side of a warm kettle. And obviously that's not pleasant. And he kind of like, obviously it didn't burn him, but now he understands that, cool, like that's pain, don't touch that. And now he's experienced the pain. Now, whether you agree with my style of parenting, that's up to you. But I'm sure a lot of parents can relate. You can tell a kid 1,001 things on why something is bad, why you should wipe yourself after going to the toilet, why you should wash your hands, and why you should brush your teeth, and why you should eat. They're never going to do that until they learn it the hard way. And so tying that to the whole divorce thing, currently in my relationship, I would say, I'd like to be proud about this. Like, I think we have a pretty good relationship between myself and my wife. However, I also know that a lot of people get divorces after having kids. And so I am trying to learn from these experiences, not because I'm trying to critique them. I truly want to try to learn from these experiences and understand why things like that happen. It's one of those unteachable lessons where I don't think I'm going to be able to learn the lesson until I get to that point. However, hopefully that doesn't happen. However, I am trying to put myself in the best position to understand these things and maybe force myself to learn it. I like to think I'm a little bit more mature and force myself to understand why conflicts happen between partners, married, husband, wife, or husband, whatever it might be, and not get us to that point of needing to go through a breakup or a divorce, right? And again, it's one of those unteachable lesson things. It will only happen to you and you realize what people have told you all this time is true. It's parenting. Like I draw a lot of that, and I see a lot of that in my parents, the stuff that they tell me. I never took it to heart when I was a kid, and now I'm like, oh shit, like I probably should have, but I didn't. And so now I'm trying to be a little bit more mature in myself and see, okay, like, why does divorces happen and why do people separate? And so one big thing over the last year is trying to work on improving my relationship with my wife. Not only that, trying to not just receive information and advice from other people, but really taking that to heart. There's going to be a lot of other ones as well. And I think that one of the other biggest lessons as well is that everyone's different. Everyone's different. We've got two kids. Two kids are vastly different. I'm so different to my wife, and I'm different to my friends. I'm different to my peers. My wife's different to her friends, and yada, yada, yada. My wife is different to her parents. I'm different to my parents. And I think the important thing here is understanding that whilst, yes, from a man of science, and, I did say I was lecturing in that area this year, which I thought was really cool, there's always going to be statistical means and stuff like that. It's like the average is like the average. But in the end of the day, we need to treat everyone very differently. And most importantly, we need to also treat everyone as they are, not necessarily treat everyone as to what they think they should be, right? And that's sort of the art of coaching, of course. And this is where I'm really doing my best to not compare my kids to other kids. And I really try my best to also not compare myself to others. And I do that a lot. I might not seem like that maybe on paper to some, because they think, oh, I've actually got comments saying, oh man, you're very well put together, and that's very flattering. But I just think I need to be better at that, to make myself not compare to others and do what I like to do, help, create stuff, support the family, and I want to model that to my kids. And so to kind of maybe end this episode, because I know it's a 15-minute long one, I don't know how frequently I'll be doing episodes, but I'm going to try to make sure I do that as frequent as I can. Again, the goal of this podcast is to really help my kids first and foremost. And of course, if it does grow into something bigger, I'm all up for it, right? Like I'm cool and I'm happy. That is the thing. But the theme is I'm growing up. And it's really just a podcast about my experience being a father. There's going to be good things and bad things, but I think I want to kind of, share the more harsh realities of being a dad, even though I think like a lot of people share the good parts about being a parent. I think the hard parts are not being shared enough. And the hard parts are shared on social media, but I don't think it's being shared to the degree that fathers particularly have access to understand why they're feeling run down, desperate, depressed, feeling like the weight of the world's on their shoulders. And there's a little bit of talk about that's a little bit more out there, but I just don't think what's being shared, despite those stories are coming out, that's just the surface stuff. And I want to try to be as vulnerable as I can to the public, with obviously with respect to privacy of everyone else, my family, most importantly. But I would like to think I'm an open book. See, to my kids, I'm always going to be an open book, and which also means with the goal of this podcast, it being an open book of me. Hopefully, you, dear listener, might be able to take something away from my vulnerability and honesty as well. I'm slurring my words here. Hopefully, everyone is doing well. Hopefully, everyone is working on their goals, and hopefully, from a mental health standpoint, everyone is finding some solace and finding some reprieve from everything that's going on in the world right now. Be well, and catch you in the next one, I suppose.